Alrighty. So I basically covered this in my intro to plants and alternation of generations, but these are like the actual notes, so I will go through this too. So again, with the plant life cycle, most of the time the actual plant that you are looking at is called the sporophyte stage, meaning that it is diploid, it has 2 copies of the chromosomes. The sporophyte stage will produce spores that will grow into the gametophytes, which are haploid. Those are the sex cells, your gametes. The gametophytes, the male and female gametophyte, depending on whether it's a part of a flower or a cone, whatever, they will produce the sex cells. For males, it's pollen. For females, it's the eggs or the ovules. And then when they combine, they will that will result in fertilization, which produces the plant parts that lead to the next stage of reproduction. Usually seeds for vascular plants, but just for like little mini plants for non-vascular plants. For non-vascular plants, remember those are your mosses, your very simple things. Very similarly, your non-vascular plants, they produce the sporophytes. The sporophytes produce the spores that will grow into the gametophytes. The gametophytes produce the sperm and the egg. And then once they are fertilized, that's when the zygote forms. And then that zygote, that little baby plant, will grow into a regular full-size adult plant. So the main difference there is that with non-vascular or seedless plants, the sporophytes are released and develop right when they are fertilized. There's no like kind of in-between seed period there where things can be dormant. With vascular plants, the gametophyte develops inside the sporophyte inside the plant. So with vascular plants, the whole process is a little bit more protected, a little bit more safe. With non-vascular, zygotes are basically just released out into the wild and good luck to them. Vascular plants, they are a little bit more protected. And with your angiosperms, the seed is protected inside the flower. With gymnosperms, the cones, the female cones, once they open up, the seeds will just fall out. So they're a little bit less protected than the ones inside the flowers, which is why they're called gymnosperms. Gymno means bare, the seeds are bearish. But they're both, relatively speaking, they're both more protected than the non-vascular plants. Now, this is how pollination works. Pollination can happen through a bunch of different means, but essentially the pollen will land on the female part of the flower, the stigma, it will grow down, and then where it will fertilize the ovules inside of the ovary, and then depending on your plant, it'll either turn into a bulb or it will turn into a fruit. And again, as you can see here in these pictures, everything is all nice and labeled. With your angiosperms, the seed develops inside the flower. Gymnosperms, it develops inside the cone. So with gymnosperms, again, the little, oh my gosh, I just forgot what they're called. Ovules are tucked inside of the female cone. The pollen sticks to the outside of the cone, grows in, fertilizes those ovules. The cone then opens up so the seeds can fall out. Angiosperms, the female part of the flower will be pollinated and the seed will begin to develop inside of that flower. You need to memorize all of the parts of the flower, and I have some tricks to help you out. So the stamen is the term for the male part, the whole thing. And you can remember it's the male part because it is the stamen, male part, blah, 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 you get it. The little stalk thing is called the filament. The top where the pollen is produced is called the anther. For your female part in the middle, this whole thing is called a pistil. You can remember that ladies carry pistols, I guess. I mean, anyone can do that, but you can think of a lady carrying a pistol in her purse. The very top part is called the stigma. It is the sticky part where the pollen will attach. You can remember sticky stigma. Then the pollen will grow down this tube, which is called the style. You can remember that women have style. And then, obviously, the bottom part is called the ovary with the ovules. Only females have ovaries and ovules. So you can remember that. The petals are basically just there for decoration and to lure certain insects into pollinating flowers. And the sepals, if you've ever looked at a flower before it has bloomed, the sepals are basically the modified leaves that cover up the flower to help protect it before it actually blooms. Pretty much talked about that already. Now, whenever we are talking about fertilization with pollination, we are talking about sexual reproduction in plants. Even if a flower were to fertilize itself, which can happen. So, for example, you look at this one up here. You see how the stamens and the pistils are all about the same height? A flower like this would be a lot more likely to self-pollinate itself. Whereas if you, next time you go outside, look at flowers and notice how the parts look. If you see that the pistil, the female part, is a lot taller than the male parts, it's more likely that flower is pollinated by something else, by a different flower through wind or insects or whatever. But a flower like this would be more likely to pollinate itself. But even if it does pollinate itself, it is still considered sexual because you have the male and the female gametes meeting up and making a new thing. Now, even though plants can reproduce sexually, they can all reproduce asexually as well. If I were to rip a leaf off of an apple tree and plant it and it grows into a new tree, that would be fragmentation, which is a form of asexual reproduction. If I'm a strawberry plant and I grow a little runner, like down there in the middle, I grow a little runner, that runner pops up a couple feet away from me, that's another clone, that's asexual reproduction. If you leave a potato in your cabinet for too long and it starts growing that stuff, that's considered budding, which is another form of asexual reproduction. So remember that if it's from a part of the original plant, it's asexual. If it is pollination, even if it's self-pollination, it is sexual reproduction. And now we're on to seed dispersal. So there are a lot of different ways that pollen can be dispersed. Wind, rain, any type of water, insects are all different ways. That's why a lot of flowers are colored a certain way to attract certain insects so they can be pollinated. Animals eating fruit or seeds can be very beneficial. Evolutionarily speaking, if you are delicious, then things are more likely to eat you and poop out your seeds somewhere else, meaning you are able to spread more easily. So that is an evolutionary benefit there. Different plants have different strategies, and whatever they do obviously works for them. And whenever you plant a seed and it starts to sprout where you can see it above the ground, that is called germination. That is when the zygote or the embryo starts to actually grow into the new sporophyte.